Hello everyone, I'm Psycherbolic, your Envoy of Hope, and welcome to WIWR. Sailor Moon is one of the most influential and very likely the most popular magical girl anime ever made. It was also one of the first anime I ever watched, but the thing is I never decided to sit down and watch it start to stop until now. What I will say about it is that it definitely took a different direction than I was expecting. First off, it spends a lot of time waiting for Usagi to even meet the other Sailor Scouts. So it spends a lot of time just watching her and establishing her character, and before they even start introducing the others. And once they start introducing the others, they introduce them all at the same time. I certainly did not remember Rei being such a bitch. But what I will say is that even like the episodes that you think are like nonsensical filler episodes end up working towards the ending as actual moments of character development that later inform later plot points. And I was surprised to see that they went there with that. Like, I would have assumed that, the episodes would just be one-off monsters of the week kind of episodes, but they ended up actually cycling back around. It uses a lot of MacGuffins, but once one MacGuffin gets tiresome, they switch to another. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily good writing or not, but it certainly keeps things fresh enough that you don't end up getting bored of it. I definitely did not see the ending coming, though, because I knew that there were 5 seasons of Sailor Moon, and everyone dies at the end, and that was jarring, to say the least. So, yeah. Haven't started R yet, because I decided to record these after I finish each anime, but now that everyone's been reincarnated without their memories, I'm really interested to see in R how they're gonna fix that for the next 4 seasons. Sailor Moon R starts off with the Makai tree arc, which has like 2 aliens come to the planet to try and get energy for their tree by absorbing energy from other people. And as it turns out, they didn't need to do that because the real solution was love. But then we get into the real meat and potatoes of Sailor Moon R, which is when Chibiusa, small lady Usagi, comes back from the future, shoots her mom in the face, and then tries to steal the silver crystal for way too long of a time. R is definitely a slower and weaker season than the original. There's a lot less character development, there's a lot less tiebacks to the earlier episodes. It's just generally kind of slow overall, and it kind of falls into the same problems that the first season did, except it goes on even longer. Instead of having like emotional punches throughout the whole thing, it just kind of relies on one, and every single episode just kind of involves a monster showing up, and then the girls fight it, and then the villains are trying to corrupt a location so that they can, they're trying to corrupt the location and get Chibiusa, but it usually just ends up with the villains trying to corrupt the location, a Sailor Scout shows up there, and then they fight a monster. And it's basically that for like 42 episodes. I will say, for the Makai Tree arc, though, even though not much happens in it, at least the girls get a power upgrade, and Chibiusa is kind of more annoying in this than she was in Crystal. But it's not she's not unbearable. They definitely lean into the child aspect of the character, which, from what I can tell, she's not 900 in the anime, so she's literally a child. So I guess that's why they leaned into that. There's a lot of weird changes that the original animes made. Like, Mamoru is, like, in college now, which makes his relationship with Usagi way weirder. But yeah, I did appreciate how the sisters got redeemed, and they did some interesting things with Sapphire and Diamond. One thing I will say that I was kind of disappointed on, though. Oh yeah, Mamoru breaks up with Usagi, and then that carries them for like 40 episodes of drama. Maybe 30, like 30 episodes of drama. And then the reason why it happened was really stupid. Like, he had a dream, and then the dream was just sent by his future self to test their relationship because they needed a strong relationship to defeat the Death Phantom. It wasn't great, I will say that. And I was disappointed that by the time we finally got to Neo Crystal Tokyo, which I waited the entire goddamn season for, we barely spent any meaningful time in Neo Crystal Tokyo. Like, what is a future where everyone is immortal and Sailor Moon has for some reason been put in charge of humanity? Like, I don't know, because we spent like 11 seconds there and everything was encased in ice. So I was a little disappointed in that. And while they were there, they just fought like 3 monsters and that was it. And not a whole lot happens. And then they just go back to the original time. And I'm like, okay. And we barely got to spend any time with Pluto. So that was disappointing also. But I will say the one thing that redeems the whole season, that ending scene where Sailor Moon transforms into Princess Serenity and then Chibiusa takes the silver crystal from the future and they do what I can only describe as a mother-daughter Kamehameha against Death Phantom was fucking hype. Sailor Moon R, The Promise of the Rose, is a Sailor Moon R movie. It's about Mamoru, when he was a child, right after the car accident, encountered an alien boy named Fiore, and he gave him a rose that turned out to be originally from Usagi to Fiore, and then Fiore returned to space and promised to shower flowers down onto Mamoru when he returned. And while wandering aimlessly and lonely through space, he encountered an evil flower that eats planets. And I think they said it was, I think Luna said it was supposed to be like the most dangerous threat in the universe, which sounds wrong considering where the fucking show goes, but apparently it's a pretty dangerous flower. If I had to take a guess where this movie takes place in the timeline, I expect it to take place after Chibiusa discovers that Usagi is Sailor Moon, and after she learns that she has the silver crystal, but before they time travel to that future, but after Usagi and Mamoru get back together. So that like brief, probably like 2-3 day time period, I think is where this movie takes place. This kind of comes off as just a really long Sailor Moon episode. It was also a pretty short movie. I think it was only like an hour or so. But yeah, so there's an establishment, and then they find the threat, and then there's a long fight scene, and then there's some emotional drama with Fiore, who turned out to not be so bad at the end. And then they beat Fiore in a dramatic fight that, of course, involves Usagi transforming into Princess Serenity and dropping that silver crystal. It was a pretty good movie. It was definitely interesting. Nothing too crazy. What stood out, I think, the most to me was just how well animated it was, because, the Sailor Moon anime is usually pretty shoddily animated. I mean, it came out in the 90s, there's hundreds of episodes, but when you, throw it at a movie, it comes out pretty damn good, and I could really appreciate that. Overall, solid movie. Sailor Moon S has the same general layout as the other seasons of Sailor Moon, where it starts off with a sort of setup, and then a villain shows up at the end, and then they fight the villain, and then they defeat it. All the while, the villains are looking for a series of MacGuffins, starting off with talismans found in Pure Heart crystals, and then just general Pure Heart crystals. In this season, a evil scientist is trying to awaken the Guardian of Silence, Sailor Saturn, my personal favorite Sailor Scout, in an attempt to cause her to destroy the world, but he's actually serving an interdimensional entity called Pharaoh 90 who wants to destroy the universe. It's complicated, but it doesn't really matter. This season also introduces everyone's favorite kissing cousins, Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune. And overall, this was actually a really good season, because although it does hit a lot of similar beats to the previous seasons, what it does do is it allows the unnecessary monster fights to kind of take a back seat. And it really focuses down on developing the characters and giving them their time to shine. And the monster encounters and the fight scenes just generally take up less time towards the end. It also has probably the best villain in Sailor Moon history, Udiel, who she's so great because she's like a punch card villain. Like, there's an instance where she just like leaves a fight early because she has a headache. So she brings the monster in and she's like, all right, monster, get it. And then Sailor Uranus is like, you wasted your time. They don't have a talisman either. And she's like, okay, great. And then she gets in her car and she tells the monster, you got this. And then she just drives off. She had to get into like a kindergarten pottery class and she just drives her car through a door. She's great. I love her. Unfortunately, she got killed by one of her teammates called Mehmet, and Mehmet sucks, but Udiel was great. Uranus and Neptune, also great characters. I liked seeing their relationship outside of the Deke dub. And yeah, just a generally good time. It takes a lot more of a story focus and character focus than the previous seasons. Sailor Moon S Hearts in Ice is the second Sailor Moon movie. A meteor comet thing from space carrying an evil ice entity arrives in Earth to, I think, acquire a crystal or some shit. And she's trying to freeze the entire planet, which marks the third time that the outer Sailor Scouts have failed to prevent an entity from entering the solar system, even though that's their literal job. I think this movie probably takes place after the Holy Grail is discovered, because Sailor Moon uses the Holy Grail to transform into Super Sailor Moon. But we also see that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are also working together, so I think it takes place after the death of Udiel, when they're trying to discover who the Messiah of Silence is. But I think it takes place before Hodoro is defeated, because Pluto's still alive, and Pluto should be dead at this point. This movie does put more of a focus on Luna specifically, and how at the opening of the movie, Sailor Moon says that she's never been in love, and then in the course of the movie, she falls in love with this guy who believes that Princess Kaguya lives on the moon and there's something special about the moon, which is interesting because no one has lived on the moon for thousands of years since the fall of Silver Millennium, meaning that this guy is literally crazy. And his girlfriend, who's an astronaut, keeps telling him that he's crazy. And also he's dying from the crystal that he has that's connected to the space ice comet. And he's kind of an asshole to his girlfriend. And it's implied that he's trying to push her away because he's dying and he doesn't want to tell her he's sick. But I can't just help but think the whole movie, girl, you're literally an astronaut. You can pull a better man than this. The movie has its cute moments, but it also kind of drags, especially in the beginning. There's a solid 20 minutes of this movie just dedicated to every character's transformation sequence. We have Sailor Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chibiusa transforms, and we have a Super Sailor Moon transformation. That's 11 transformations. There's also a sequence where Mamoru pretends to be Santa Claus. I don't even know why. He pretends to be Santa Claus for like a full minute before he's like, behold, I'm Tuxedo Mask. The whole movie is pretty boring. It has a long, stretched out series of fight sequences. If the previous movie was like an episode of Sailor Moon that was really long but done well, this is an episode of Sailor Moon that was really long and done poorly. It's just long fight sequences and transformation sequences, and it doesn't really go anywhere interesting, although there is an implied romance between Artemis and Luna at the end of it. So that's cute. Sailor Moon Super S starts off as the best season of Sailor Moon. It focuses not just on secondary characters and puts the focus on sort of the sidecast, but it actually brings back tertiary characters from earlier in the series, like Arcade Guy's girlfriend who went to Africa, and it puts a focus on them, and we get to see what they've been up to and how their lives are changing. And it starts off with a group of like aliens that come from the new moon, which is I thought was the dark side of the moon. It's an asteroid, but they come from a fucking asteroid, and they're called the Dead Moon Circus, and they're looking for Pegasus, whose real name is Helios, because Helios is in possession of the golden crystal, which will allow their queen to basically be youthful forever and destroy the world and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who cares? And the focus on the sidecast really makes the early parts of the season. And then at around episode 7, it goes sharply downhill. Because instead of revisiting characters that we had seen previously, it goes through the same tired tropes of reintroducing new characters, and then we have to deal with their problems, and then they get their dream mirrors stolen, and it happens every season of Sailor Moon. The villains this time it starts off with 3 guys called the Amazons, who are trying to find the mirror, the dream mirror, the dreams that contain Pegasus, because Pegasus can only live in people's dreams. But the problem is we find out very early on that the dream that contains Pegasus is Chibiusa, and then we have to spend the next 30 some odd episodes before the villains come to this information. So there's no tension on, is this going to be the one? Is this going to be the one? How can they possibly top that one like they did in previous seasons? Instead, we always know that anytime they're not looking at Chibiusa, it's completely pointless. Another thing is that with the introduction of Pegasus, Sailor Moon gains the ability to basically enter into the Super Sailor Moon form whenever she wants, as does Chibi Moon, and then later on in the season, all of the Sailor Scouts gain the ability to enter a form akin to Super Sailor Moon as Super Sailor Scouts. The problem is that the Dead Moon Circus, by and large, is very obviously weaker than the Death Busters ever was, and so it never feels like there's any reason for Sailor Moon to transform into Super Sailor Moon, let alone the entire cast to go super. There's never any tension in the entire season, and then I think somewhere around episode 20 or something, the 3 Amazons lose their powers and become normal people like we saw with Witches 5, and then what happens is they're replaced with a group of, I think 4 or 5 characters, 4 girls, I think, called the Amazonesses, which the name on that is ridiculous, but whatever, who are just so boring. Now, the Amazons had a gimmick where they would basically only hunt for people who they found attractive, and they all thought they were huge studs that could seduce anyone, and they'd go in there, and then they'd botch it up because of their terrible personalities. And it led to some comedy, even if it was still not great, but when the Amazonesses take over, it's just nothing to work with. And once you leave episode 7, the focus of the secondary and tertiary characters almost completely evaporates, and the entirety of the focus shifts almost exclusively to new characters no one cares about, and Chibiusa. Now, I like Chibiusa more than the next person, but with just Chibiusa bouncing off of herself and a literal horse, there's not a lot to grab onto in this season. And by the end of it, you're just fucking tired of everything that is happening. It just wears you down of just endless nonsense. It is akin to filler and the lack of accomplishments that this season manages to put through. And the preview at the end of this season shows that Queen Nehelenia, the main villain of this arc, survives to the next season anyway. So by the end, this arc was pointless and it lasted way too long and wasn't interesting in the first place. Sailor Moon S specials start with a recap episode and then goes into another recap episode. It doesn't really add much. Then the third episode of the Sailor Moon S specials explains where Neptune and Uranus were during the events of Super S. And they were pretty much doing exactly what you'd expect. Because the Black Moon came from inside of the solar system, they pretty much just went with, well, it's not our fucking job, and then they didn't do anything about it, which is exactly what I thought they were doing, and why they didn't appear in Super S. So they were around, they were on a cruise ship, they were fucking off. The final episode of the Super S specials involves a new girl who enters into Chibiusa's class, and they think she's a vampire, and it turns out she is, in fact, a vampire sent by the Dead Moon Circus. This seems to take place after Chibi Moon and Sailor Moon gain their permanent super forms, but before the other Guardians gain their permanent super forms. It's okay all around, but nothing too special. Sailor Moon Super S Plus, Ami's First Love, is a short side story that actually takes the focus of the story and puts it specifically on Ami, Sailor Mercury, who is probably the least focused on of all of the Sailor Scouts in the entire series, other than maybe Pluto. It involves her creating a rivalry with another student who is going to practice exams and also scoring perfect scores on them, called Mercurius. As she grows, a sort of crush towards that person, and some sort of alien, I'm not sure the origin of this alien, ends up like absorbing her energy to tire her out more. It's actually pretty cute. It shows off a lot of Ami's personality, which we don't get to see very often, and it's very high energy. Just the whole little short was high energy and very dynamic, and I was actually like strangely surprised and impressed with it, and I definitely enjoyed it. Sailor Moon Super S Black Dream Hole is the third and final Sailor Moon movie, this one specifically being the movie for Sailor Moon Super S. As far as the timeline, because all of the Sailor Scouts are in their super forms, but Pegasus doesn't appear, I'm inclined to say it probably takes place at the very end of Super S, after the Dead Moon Circus has actually been dealt with. I will say that Uranus and Neptune appear in this, which is fine, but so does Pluto, who I was pretty sure was dead, so it might even take place in the final season of Sailor Moon, and not necessarily in Super S, despite being the Super S movie. That said, it starts off with a sort of Pied Piper of Hamelin scenario where a guy uses a flute. He's an alien, I think. They don't explain what is happening with these villains in this movie, but he is kidnapping children, and I had to write down the villain's plan because the Pied Piper was working for a queen who is actually the Black Dream Hole, and her plan was to use the sugar energy of children's dreams to feed the Black Dream Hole, which is herself, so it consumes Earth and keeps everyone in dream coffins for the rest of their lives. Why does she want to do this? I have no idea. I guess because she's the Black Dream Hole, and so she wants to feed herself, but the reason she specifically states is she wants to keep everyone in the dream coffins, and she says it would look pretty, so I guess she just wants to have everyone's pretty dreams inside of her Black Dream Hole. Also, I think we need to point out that the name of this movie is Sailor Moon Super S, the movie Black Dream Hole, and I have said Black Dream Hole more times than any rational person should have to. Anyway, I don't understand this movie. I think the villain's plot is fucking bonkers. And she is in control of sugar fairies whose goals is to make sure that I think it was stated that they are watching over the sugar energy in children's dreams. And dreams are getting real weird in Sailor Moon, and Sailor Moon has no idea what a dream is, just as a series, and we knew that from the whole Super S saga, where Pegasus was in people's dreams, and dreams just meant whatever the fuck they wanted to throughout the whole season. This movie was a mess writing-wise, and let me tell you, when it wasn't being a mess writing-wise, it was not interesting. They spend like half the movie fighting Candy, Actually, they didn't spend half the movie fighting Candy. I thought they spent half the movie fighting Candy, and then when I looked at how much longer the movie was going on, I realized they only spent like 10 minutes fighting Candy, and it was just so boring. I was like, well, this has to be half the movie, right? Nope. And then they go into a dream black hole, and Sailor Moon blows up a black hole because she's fucking Sailor Moon and she can do that. There's some crazy shit that happens in this, but it's not as interesting as I'm making it sound, is what I'm telling you. And another problem with the movie is that during the final battle against the Dream Black Hole, I'm sorry, I keep saying Dream Black Hole because that makes sense. The Black Dream Hole, in the final battle against the Black Dream Hole Queen, there's black lightning that's getting shot everywhere, and they use so many white frames that anyone who is prone to seizures would have died watching this movie. There is so many white frames. I was getting a headache just looking at it. This is not a fun movie. This is easily the worst Sailor Moon movie, and one of the worst of the original 90s Sailor Moon products, period. Sailor Moon Sailor Stars is the final season of Sailor Moon. It starts off with a continuation from the last season where Queen Nahalenia returns and infects people's mirrors and makes them infatuated with mirrors. And she does this not so that she can acquire some MacGuffin or some item or something or gain power for herself, but she does this purely as a trap to kill everyone Sailor Moon loves. And it has a surprisingly interconnected story where it kind of baits you first into thinking that it's going to have the same, formulaic plot that the other Sailor Moon seasons have. But instead, it just takes a 180, and then all of the instead of doing an episodic sort of story, it begins to tell things in sequence. It's pretty good on paper, and during it, she infatuates Mamoru, and Chibiusa stops existing because Mamoru ends up getting turned. So, yeah, it also brings back the Outer Guardians. I think they actually return in that season. That part of the season is when the Outer Guardians return, including Setsuna, who I was pretty sure was dead, and Hodoro, who just spontaneously ages up. Then it goes on to the final arc, the Sailor Stars arc, which is, unfortunately, back to the formulaic styles of regular Sailor Moon. It introduces 3 idol singers who are boys on stage, but are girls when they transform, and I think the implication is that they're actually women who are transforming into men, so I'm going to assume the Sailor Stars are female. I'm not sure. They could be both, neither, fluid, I don't know. But anyway, so the Sailor Stars show up and they're looking for a true star seed, and there's 1,000 of them, and the villains are working for Sailor Galexia, who is the strongest magical girl in the galaxy or universe. They kept changing which word they were using, and she wants to collect all of the true star seeds and all of the star seeds in the galaxy so that she's the strongest in the galaxy. And hilariously, she keeps sending her minions, who are implied to be previous warriors from other planets who had their pure star seeds stolen, and they are hilariously incompetent at finding people with actual true star seeds, and it baffles me that this is the case, because apparently planet Earth is just filled with them. There was 11. It was nuts how hard they had to do on this. But yeah, so they eventually... What I will say about the villains about this one is that the first villain, Sailor Iron Mouse, is a punch clock villain similar to Udiel, where she's clearly just trying to do her job and just trying to get it done, but she's also scared of her boss. And it was a shame when she died. And then she got replaced by these 2 girls, Aluminum Siren and someone else. I don't remember, because Aluminum Siren is the only one that matters, because Aluminum Siren, with a deadly efficiency, managed to figure out that Sailor Moon was, that Usagi Tsukino was Sailor Moon way faster than any other villain, and she also died faster than any villain. So there is that. Galexia was a little too bomb heavy. She killed her followers way too quickly, surpassing even Queen Beryl in that regard. Anyway, it ends in a whole dramatic fight scene where everyone dies, and then Sailor Moon saves everyone with the power of love and friendship and hope that people can be better. It's actually a pretty good season. One of the bigger issues is that the Sailor Starlights are fucking awful, and they have almost no redeeming qualities until the very end of the season, and it just goes right back to the same formulaic plot structure that all of the other previous seasons had, including the previous season, because we already know where a pure starseed is right from the midpoint of this season, because it's revealed when Aluminum Siren figures it out. So we have to deal with that same plot element where we already know where the starseed is and everyone else is just fucking around. It adds a lot to the background lore of the series. It's definitely good, but it's not great. So this was the first episode where I recorded my reviews directly after finishing the series. Tell me what you think. Tell me how it worked out. But yeah, I think it went pretty well. So right now, if you want more of me, come check out my Twitch channel. It's Horror Game Month. We do it every year. We've already done Silent Hill 3, and we're well on our way to completing Resident Evil 4. And we'll be doing Fatal Frame and maybe Amnesia Dark Descent later this month. So if you want to check that out, come out, check out my Twitch channel. It's in the description. I have the new podcast going on, which is the links more available on my channel. You might have noticed some clips from it. I take out a little segment that we do at the end of the show called Anime Dartboard, where it's like an anime book club, and we talk about a new anime every month, and we create the prompts during that episode. So come check that out if you want, but if not, hey, I've been Sacrobolic, you're on Void of Hope, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.